The sky over Hawaii was still pitch black when the first propellers sliced through the night. No sirens, no gunfire, only the wind, and something approaching that no one on the ground could yet comprehend. 8:30 a.m., December 7th, 1941. A morning that should have been ordinary. At Pearl Harbor, many sailors were still asleep. Some had just finished their night shift, their uniforms not yet changed. On the decks, a few took the chance to smoke, gazing out over water as calm as glass. No one knew they were standing on the edge of a nightmare. And then, the sound came. Not a siren. It was the sound of engines, but unlike anything they were familiar with. One soldier looked up. He saw something glide through the faint early light. An aircraft. But on its wings was not the symbol of the United States. A red circle. That moment lasted less than a second. Then, hell opened. The first bomb fell like an unavoidable arrow. It tore through the air, struck a battleship, and exploded. The shockwave swept across the water, tossing nearby men like rag dolls. No one gave an order. No one had time to react. More planes followed immediately, flying so low that people on the ground could clearly see the pilots' faces. Machine gun fire ripped through the air, tearing into rows of parked aircraft lined up like pre-drawn targets. An entire line of planes was consumed in flames within seconds. On a battleship, a sailor ran onto the deck with his shirt still unbuttoned. He saw flames erupt ahead, then a second explosion. The air trembled. His ears rang. Everything seemed to slow down. He didn't understand what was happening, and that was the most terrifying part. Not the explosions, not the fire, but the silence before it, when no one knew what was coming. Within minutes, the entire naval base was awakened by violence. The alarm finally sounded, but by then it was too late. Anti-aircraft guns began to turn, but many were still locked. Ammunition hadn't been distributed. Some storage rooms were still sealed. Nothing was ready for war, but war had arrived. Above, Japanese pilots flew in perfect formation. They did not hesitate. Every target had been memorized in advance. Every ship, every runway, every position had been calculated. They did not attack randomly. They struck the heart. A torpedo plunged into the water, skimming forward like a hunting predator. It slammed into a ship's hull. A deep, muffled explosion echoed from below the surface. Something those on deck couldn't see, but could feel through the violent vibrations. The ship tilted. Water surged in like an unstoppable flood. An officer shouted orders, but his voice was swallowed by a series of explosions. There were no clear commands anymore, only survival instinct. Some rushed to pull their comrades to safety. Some tried to open ammunition stores. Some stood frozen, unable to believe what was happening. In those first minutes, the chaos was more dangerous than the bombs. A group of sailors tried to rotate an anti-aircraft gun by hand. They didn't have time to wait for power. Their hands trembled, but they forced the barrel upward toward the sky. When the gun finally fired, the first shot missed completely, but they didn't stop. Shot after shot. Off target, then closer, then hit. A Japanese plane was struck, burst into flames, and crashed into the sea. Cheers erupted for a few brief seconds, a small spark of hope in a sea of fire. But immediately more planes appeared. Not a single wave, but multiple waves layered one upon another. The second wave arrived before the first had even ended. An armor-piercing bomb dropped onto a large ship. It tore through layers of steel before detonating inside. The explosion didn't just destroy, it ripped the ship apart from within, like a heart being crushed. Flames rose high enough to be seen for miles. Thick black smoke curled upward, covering the sky. Morning light turned into a fiery orange glow. On the water, oil spread and ignited, turning the sea into a mirror of fire. Those who fell into the water had to swim through flames. There was nowhere safe. A sailor clung to a piece of debris, surrounded by drifting patches of fire. He didn't dare move much, only trying to stay afloat. Each time a wave hit, the flames crept closer, No one had trained them for this. No one thought it could happen. Above, the planes continued circling like patient predators. They were in no hurry. They knew their targets below couldn't escape. One Japanese pilot dropped dangerously low, aiming straight at a line of ships. He pulled the trigger. Bullets streamed out like a continuous line of fire, sweeping across the deck. Sparks flew from metal, accompanied by sharp, dry impacts. On the ground, a group of soldiers finally broke open an ammunition storage. They passed crates from hand to hand so quickly their hands burned. No one spoke. There was no need. Everyone understood that if they were even a second too slow, there might not be another chance. A gun began firing continuously. Each round traced bright lines across the sky. Not all hit, but every shot was an act of defiance. The chaos slowly transformed into a strange kind of order. Not the order of planning, but the order of survival. Those who remained began to find their roles. Gunner, medic, line handler, firefighter. No one waited for orders anymore. Each person became part of a defensive machine. But time was not on their side. The attack lasted only about 2 hours. 2 hours. It sounds short, but in those 2 hours, an entire fleet was crippled. Thousands of lives were swept into a storm of fire and steel. A normal morning was completely shattered. Somewhere in the base, a radio finally managed to send out a distress signal. The voice was trembling, distorted, but still carried the unimaginable truth. Pearl Harbor is under attack. Not a drill. Not a mistake. This is real. And as that message spread, the world began to change. Not gradually, but instantly. Because what was happening here was not just an attack. It was a blow to the belief that war was still far away. And in that moment, that distance vanished. The smoke had not yet cleared when a cold truth began to emerge. The attack was not chaos. It was a perfect blueprint. Even as Pearl Harbor was still engulfed in flames, in the sky above, Japanese pilots had already begun withdrawing from the area according to plan. There was no pursuit, no resistance strong enough to stop them. They came, struck, and left, as if they had never existed. But below, the consequences did not disappear with them. One ship continued to burn, flames spreading from compartment to compartment. Red-hot steel warped and bent, letting out horrifying screeches. A group of sailors was trapped inside. They pounded on the steel door, screaming, but their voices were swallowed by explosions and fire. No one could get in. No one could save them. A soldier stood outside, fists clenched, eyes fixed on the door, shaking with each impact. He did not turn away. He could not, but he also could do nothing. That was the moment when war stopped being a concept. It became a choice with no choice. On the other side of the harbor, a ship had capsized. Survivors crawled onto the hull, slipping on oil and water. They clung to anything that could keep them from falling. From below, knocking sounds echoed from inside the ship. The trapped, they were still alive. They knocked, steadily, like a signal. But with each passing minute, the sound grew weaker. A rescue team tried to drill through the thick steel. The drill bit glowed red, throwing sparks. They knew that if they were even a little slower, the air inside would run out. But they also knew they might not make it in time. Time in war does not follow a clock. It follows life, and life was fading. On shore, an officer looked at a preliminary report. The numbers were incomplete, but enough to silence him. Ships sunk, others heavily damaged. Dozens of aircraft destroyed on the ground. But what chilled him was not the numbers. It was how it all happened. No clear warning, no time to prepare, no sign large enough to change the outcome. Everything unfolded as if someone had known exactly where they were weakest and struck precisely there. In another corner of the base, a radar technician recalled a detail he could not forget. Before the attack began, he had seen a large signal on the screen, a cluster of incoming targets. He had reported it, but the response he received was, "It might just be a group of familiar aircraft." No one imagined the worst, and the worst happened. That detail did not create an explosion, but it haunted more than any blast, because it showed that disaster sometimes does not come from ignorance, but from failing to believe what we see. On the water, oil still burned. Thick black smoke covered the sky. Sunlight was distorted, turning the entire area into something apocalyptic. A medic knelt beside a wounded comrade. He didn't have enough equipment, not enough time, but he still tried, bandaging, pressing down on the wound, keeping the man conscious. "Don't fall asleep." Just 2 words. But in that moment, it was everything. Around them, others were fighting, not against the enemy in the sky, but against death itself as it spread. Some dragged the wounded from the wreckage. Some fought flames with their bare hands. Some stood blocking exits, giving others a chance to live. There were no heroes in the way people usually imagine. Only people pushed to their limits, who kept going. Meanwhile, far away, the first pieces of information began spreading across the United States. Fragmented reports, incomplete lines, urgent phone calls. The news was incomplete, but enough to create a growing sense of unease. A quiet room suddenly felt heavy. A waking city suddenly paused. People didn't fully understand what had happened, but they felt one thing: the world had just been torn open. Back at Pearl Harbor, the explosions had begun to fade. No new planes appeared. No further waves of attack followed. But this silence did not bring peace. It only revealed more clearly what had been destroyed. Smoldering ships, shattered aircraft, empty spaces where people once stood. An officer walked along the harbor. He said nothing, gave no orders. He simply looked. Each step was a truth. Each glance was a loss. He stopped in front of a half-sunken ship. The remaining portion rose above the water like a reminder that could never be erased. He knew this was not just damage. It was a turning point, something that would change how people saw war. Forever. Elsewhere, the survivors began to gather. They were no longer panicking like before. The fear was still there, but it had changed into something else. A heavy silence. A new awareness. They had just lived through something no one had prepared them for, and they knew. It wasn't over. No one said it out loud, but everyone understood. The past 2 hours were not the end of an event. They were the beginning of an irreversible chain reaction. A young soldier stood looking out at the sea. Just hours earlier, everything had been calm. Now, there was only smoke and fire. He was no longer the person he had been that morning. No one was. Because there are moments in history that don't just change events. They change people. And Pearl Harbor was one of those moments. If you're still watching, leave a comment. What do you think is more terrifying? A surprise attack, or seeing the warning signs and failing to believe them in time? That morning ended, but its aftermath did not stop at Pearl Harbor. It spread like an undercurrent, silent, but unstoppable. Just hours later, closed rooms in Washington lit up. Calls followed one after another. Reports were transmitted at an unprecedented speed. Every detail from Pearl Harbor was pieced together like fragments of a horrifying picture. And as that picture slowly became complete, no one doubted it anymore. This was not an incident. This was war. No more distance. No more safe zones. A nation that once believed the ocean was a natural shield had just realized that shield had been pierced in only 2 hours. At Pearl Harbor, as the smoke began to clear, what remained was not only physical destruction, but a quiet question. How could this have happened? Survivors began recounting moments they could never forget. One remembered the first engine sound, unlike any aircraft he had ever heard. Another remembered the light from the first explosion, too bright, too close, as if the sun had fallen onto the water. Small, scattered details. But when put together, they formed a terrifying truth. This attack was not just precise, it was nearly perfect. Key targets were hit from the very beginning. Aircraft were destroyed before they could take off. Large ships were disabled within minutes. Every move by the attackers seemed as if it had been rehearsed hundreds of times. No hesitation, no major mistakes, only speed and absolute surprise. But the strangest part lay in what was not hit. Some large fuel depots remained intact. Critical repair facilities were not completely destroyed. Certain strategic assets survived the firestorm, not because they were unimportant, but because the attack ended too soon. The decision to withdraw was made while everything was still burning, a decision that later would be remembered as a quiet turning point. If those targets had been completely destroyed, things might have been different. But history does not run on hypotheticals. It records only what happened. And what happened was a strike that made the entire world stop. The next day, a speech was delivered before Congress. No need for complex words, no need for lengthy analysis. Only a single truth, spoken clearly. A date which will live in infamy, not because of the number of bombs, but because of how it came. Sudden, swift, irreversible. The decision was made almost immediately. No prolonged debate, no hesitation. A door had been opened, and it could not be closed. War had officially begun. But for those who were there at Pearl Harbor, the war did not begin that day. It began the moment they looked up at the sky and saw the red circle. The moment they heard the first explosion. The moment they realized that everything they believed was safe was no longer safe. In the days that followed, the work did not stop. Sunken ships began to be inspected. Wrecked aircraft were pulled from the debris. Burned areas were cleared. Everything was documented, every detail. Not to remember, but to understand. Engineers, officers, analysts began searching for answers in every fragment. They examined the angles of the bombs, the flight paths of the planes, the timing of each explosion. They were not searching for emotion. They were searching for patterns. Because if they could understand how this attack unfolded, they could prevent something like it from happening again. But there was one thing they could not change. Those 2 hours had happened, and their impact did not lie only in what was destroyed. It lay in what was set in motion. A nation changing its state overnight. A society shifting from observer to participant. A world already under tension, now pulled into something far larger. No one remained on the sidelines. Pearl Harbor was not the largest battle, but it was the awakening blow. A strike that made everything that followed unavoidable. Years later, when people looked back, they did not only remember the fire and the smoke, they remembered the feeling of that moment. The moment when peace was shattered. The moment when everything changed too quickly to comprehend. The moment when the old world ended and a new one began. And the most terrifying part was not what happened in those 2 hours, but how those 2 hours were enough to change the entire course of history. If you stayed with this story until the very last second, leave a comment. In your opinion, what truly made this attack so powerful? Perfect preparation or absolute surprise?